Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're having a good day. It was a good day for the Browns at home yesterday, defeating the Ravens and ending a Ravens 5-game winning streak, ending a 5-game losing streak for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski addressing his team after the win.
Good team win, man. Hey, who just said it? How about that team win? Yeah. What'd I tell you? We got to outlast them. Yes, sir. And we did. That last ball in the air was not going to be theirs, right, Nine? It's not going to be theirs. Because we were going to outlast this football team. I'm so proud of you guys. I told you, fellas, we got to focus on the work, okay? I told you we got to focus on the work. I also told you I love these moments. Yes, sir. Did I not tell you I love where this football team is? Yeah. I love where this football team is, okay? We're not looking for comfort. We're not looking for convenience. We're just looking for work. We're looking for playing with each other. That's what I saw here today, fellas. Last thing. I told you guys I would love nothing more than to give this game ball to the family of Jim Donovan.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Fellas, Jim loved the Cleveland Browns. He loved you guys. Okay, we love him back. We will be there for his family. This one's for Jim. Team on three. 1, 2, 3. Let's go.
Also, we get this as Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry present Jim Donovan's wife Cheryl and daughter Megan with the game ball yesterday. Jim Donovan passed away over the weekend before Sunday's game. Was a friend of this show, never refused to be on it whenever I asked him. So tough day for Browns fans. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Illyria Chronicle Telegram. I always do that with you, as well as BrownsZone.com. Right. Scott, when you look at that win, boy, did they need that.
Yeah, I mean, 5 in a row that they had lost, 1 and 6. It just felt like everything was getting away from them. And, it's still a huge uphill climb. But when you get a win against a good team like the Ravens, who'd won 5 in a row, it gives the team confidence. The Browns are clinging to every shred of hope that they have, and that gave them something. So they got one more game before the bye. If they could put 2 in a row together, they go into the bye feeling way differently than they would have at, let's say, 1 and 8.
Oh, yeah, without question. You wrote an article about Jameis Winston kind of leading the offense. What did you see from Winston yesterday?
Yeah, looked really comfortable in the pocket. Drew the ball down the field, which we had not seen a lot when Deshaun Watson was a quarterback. Got the ball out of his hands, but also wasn't afraid to hold on to it. Trusted the protection, didn't bail out of the pocket. Gave his receivers chances, and he found some one-on-one matchups and trusted his receivers to make plays, and they did, whether it was tight end David Njoku making the catch on the goal line for a touchdown or Cedric Tillman on a slant and a post to win the game. He put the ball, for the most part, he got a couple breaks, but he put the ball a lot of times on the receiver's hands, and then they took advantage of that. But he looked like a competent starting quarterback, and he fit what the Browns were trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I think it's what the offense was supposed to look like, or at least somewhat what the offense was supposed to look like all along. Might imagine a lot of voicemails, so let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. For a week since Watson's been hurt, I've been tossing back and forth if I would give him another chance next year, mainly due to his enormous contract, and just maybe in year 4 he can finally turn it around. But I know it's only one game, but this game right here cements the idea that Watson's career is over here as a Cleveland Brown. Once again, another quarterback comes into the game versus a very elite Ravens defense and puts 29 points on them, over 300 yards passing, and gets a big win that we desperately needed. The Browns have had major success with other quarterbacks not named Watson. This proves that Watson does not fit here in Cleveland.
And Scott, I know you wrote an article, Browns beat reporter for the Illyria Chronicle Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com. Do you think his days, Watson's days as starting quarterback, should be numbered? I do. I'm just curious. You're around it much more day in, day out than I am.
Yeah, I certainly think his time as the starting quarterback should be over. And, I appreciate what the caller said. I didn't need yesterday's game to cement that for me, but it certainly was more evidence on the pile that other quarterbacks have been more successful since Watson got here. Whether it was Jacoby Brissett playing pretty well in 2022 when Watson was suspended, to Joe Flacco and even P.J. Walker and DTR won a game last year, and then you see Jameis Winston come in and not miss a beat when Watson has, consistently missed beats and hasn't been able to be his former self, hasn't been able to run the offense like the Browns want. So, I understand the money issues, and those are real, and the salary cap issues are real. And I don't know if the Browns are going to be able to figure out a way to part ways with Watson, be it through a trade or cutting him. But even if they hang on to him, I don't think you can sell anyone on the idea of him being the number one guy next year. He just hasn't been on the field, and when he's been on the field, he hasn't been good enough. So I think whoever it is, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's Winston coming back, whether it's a veteran somewhere else, somebody has to be the number one entering next year, with Watson at best being the number two.
Yeah, and the other thing you could end up doing is you could end up paying him. So you're paying him the salary. You don't take the dead cap hits, and he ends up not practicing, not playing, not doing anything. It's just a sunken cost of his contract.
Yeah, there's issues with that, though, because the player has to agree to it. They changed that rule. I think it was Keyshawn Johnson back in the day with the Buccaneers where they tried to just send him home, and they did. And then I'm pretty sure it's the union fought back on it. So if you remember the whole Odell Beckham Jr. situation a few years back, the Browns would have been fine just paying him and not having him around, but that wasn't going to work. So they had to either trade him or cut him. And so that's why I think it gets sticky. And maybe they can figure it out with Watson. But I don't think you could just tell him to stay home and we're going to pay you. They'd have to come to some kind of agreement.
All right. So Kevin Stefanski was asked about Winston's play yesterday, and if it was evidence that they should have played Winston sooner.
Yeah, Jameis is the starter. I thought he did a nice job with progressions, Mary Kay. I thought he saw it clearly. And I thought a big part of that is protection was outstanding. I think we had 2 sacks, and really the one sack was this right before the sack fumble. The sack fumble obviously was a big play in the game. We have to be better there. The one after that wasn't. It was really taking it to halftime. But protection throughout the day was really, really good. And that allowed Jameis to get through his progressions and even, third, fourth in progression so that guys could come open. But that was really a large doing part by the protection.
Based on Jameis's performance yesterday, is that evidence or data that perhaps you should have benched Deshaun at some point earlier in the season and turned things over to Jameis?
Yeah, I'm not really thinking that way, Mary Kay. I thought Jameis did a nice job yesterday, obviously operating in the system, and I know he feels like he can play better, but I'm not thinking about it that way.
And Scott, that's a tough question for him to answer because look at it. The Philadelphia game and the Cincinnati game, if you get competent quarterback play, you probably win both those games. And if you're sitting there with 4 wins now, you're right in the middle of the playoff race in the AFC.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm writing a story right now about the finish of the game. And it was a lot on offense, and then obviously they get the late stop. But they had chances to win games before. You mentioned, they had Philly and Cincinnati and Vegas and the Giants, right? They had chances to win all those games late, and they didn't get one touchdown that gave them a chance, like a go-ahead touchdown. I think the only touchdown they scored in those 4 games in the fourth quarter offensively was against Cincinnati last week with a minute and a half left, and Jameis Winston threw the touchdown pass. So it just shows you how inefficient they were offensively, especially in big spots. But you're right. I mean, Kevin Stefanski, I don't know how he's supposed to answer that question. It's a legitimate question because people were talking about benching Watson for weeks. But I also, at the time, I understood the organizational decision to stick with Watson because of all the money invested, all the things we just talked about. It made sense to give him as much time as possible to pull himself out of it. But now that that's not an option, you do see the difference between when Watson was playing and when Winston played.
Yeah, and it's stark. I mean, it isn't just shades of gray. It's pretty stark. All right, some good news. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I know you tweeted this out, was out of the hospital, so he's doing better. The other thing that we found out is that Denzel Ward is in concussion protocol, suffered his 6th concussion since he has been with the Browns. So that's a concerning thing. The JOK thing, we'll see if he's able to play. I mean, those guys are probably playing. Those are the 2 best players on defense week in and week out, I think. I don't think you could argue. I know Myles Garrett, but Myles Garrett's been banged. Those are the guys that are having the 2 best years defensively, Ward and JOK.
Yeah, that might be true. I mean, Myles is Myles, and he's the most talented player. But those 2 guys are 2 and 3, and I think Denzel Ward's been fantastic this season. And he's always good, but he's been just as good this year when he's on the field, when he's healthy. Gets his hands on a ton of balls. Could probably have a half dozen interceptions if he came down with some of them. Had another one early yesterday that he didn't grab. And then JOK is making plays behind the line of scrimmage. Had a sack yesterday. Leads the team in tackles. So those are 2 huge losses if you're going to miss them for any period of time. They finished the game without him yesterday and were able to win, and that's a credit to the guys who came off the bench. But when it comes, both of them scary. I mean, JOK, it's a neck. You see him on the backboard. He's got his head immobilized. Scary sight. And then Ward, once he got to like 3 or 4 concussions since he had been drafted by the Browns, it's been a question of, okay, are you still going to play? Because those pile up. They get serious. They bring up serious questions. And the 5th one came in training camp this year, and Denzel came back in late August and talked about it. And he said his family was worried. They went and visited a specialist in Pittsburgh, and the specialists say that as long as you give the brain enough time to heal between concussions, then you're not risking anything extra because you've had so many in the past. And that's what Denzel is relying upon. He's never given any indication that he's going to stop playing. He said he'd never thought about retirement the last time it came up. And he's really just trusting that information that if he lets the brain heal, gives it enough time, that he's okay to come back. But you have to wonder, the more concussions there are, the tougher that is for him. The one yesterday, it looked like it might have happened at the end of the first half, and he banged his head on the ground. But then he came out and started the 3rd quarter, and then there was one play, and he walked to the sideline. He must not have felt right. And all of it, it's scary, and I'm sure it's scary for especially Denzel's family.
Yeah, that's real-world stuff that you can't blame a guy for considering those kind of things. Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle, Telegram, BrownsZone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each, 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle, Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave Howard from Marin County. Yes, I'm very happy to see the Browns beat the Ravens. The question I have is as follows. Due to the cap, would it be difficult to retain Jameis Winston next year when he's a free agent? And also, because of the cap hit with Deshaun Watson, will we have to give up some of our best players because we can't afford them? Yeah, how will they manage the cap so we can continue to have some good players? Thanks a lot. Take care.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, that's the question that Andrew Berry or whomever is the general manager needs to address. Winston, it depends on how well he plays the rest of the year too. I mean, there's going to be a movement. You look at Watson, you look at Wilson, Russell Wilson, you look at the trade. There's going to be a movement to go and get quarterbacks who have experience. Look at Sam Darnold. You know, there have been more success stories with those kind of guys recently.
Yeah, even a Geno Smith from a couple years. You could probably throw Baker into that
Yeah.
discussion if you wanted to. Yeah, it's a great question by the caller. They're going to have to make some really difficult decisions. And I know that they might be the best team in the league, best front office in the league, in kind of manipulating the salary cap. And part of that is, you know, they use a lot of Jimmy Haslam's cash or the Haslam's cash to pay guys early, and then they can, you know, shift the salary cap late, you know, the hit later, and then the salary cap in general goes up, and it's less of a percentage. You know, they know all the intricacies of all the numbers. But no matter what they are able to pull off, they're probably going to have to lose some players or not re-sign some players. I just don't think you can have the depth of talent that they have right now, or that they would like to have, with the huge cap number given to Deshaun Watson. So I think that's real. Now, when it comes to quarterback, as long as they're trying to win, and I would expect them to continue to try to win, you got to figure out what to do at quarterback. And is that draft the guy in the top 5? If, in fact, they wind up drafting in the top 5, we don't know. Maybe they start winning games. Or do you bring back a guy like Jameis Winston, or go try to find, or, you know, go get Sam Darnold or Justin Fields or whoever that is. So, you know, you're going to have to pay a bunch of money for your quarterbacks in general because you have Watson. And I think you want to be as frugal as possible outside of Watson, but you need a guy that can play. So I don't think Winston necessarily prices himself out of the equation. But you're right. If they go on a crazy tear, you know, there'd be other teams interested because he is a free agent.
The other question becomes, and again, assuming Kevin Stefanski is still here, which who knows, do you go back to that style of offense and that style of quarterback? I think we can say this offense it ain't worked.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that they fall back on what Stefanski has had since he's been here, which is under center, and more play action. We saw that yesterday with Jameis Winston. We saw more of it in the couple weeks before, even when Deshaun Watson was playing. They had kind of morphed back into that. I don't know if it's the offense that Ken Dorsey tried to implement. I don't know if that's a bad offense. I think the quarterback was playing so poorly, it was tough to evaluate anything. And that includes the offensive line, it includes the receivers. So I think it was more of a quarterback issue than a system issue. But we saw it yesterday. Jameis Winston is similar to Joe Flacco. Those guys stand in the pocket, they run the play action, and that's what Stefanski brought here. That's what he likes to do. I think you'd have to have a much different quarterback, whether, you know, they would have to draft a guy. Let's say they drafted a guy that had a skill set like a Lamar Jackson, then you tweak it. But otherwise, you bring in a quarterback that fits what they do.
All right, NFL Week 8 grades. This from CBS Sports for the Browns, A+. Between Joe Flacco's performance with the Browns last season, Winston's performance in this game, it's pretty clear Kevin Stefanski's offense can work with the right quarterback, but Watson wasn't the right quarterback. 2 and 6. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes as the Browns season goes from here. And yeah, that's fair. The end of the game, you got the full Jameis Winston experience. As somebody that has followed him, there's the throw where it was like, why did you do that? And Hamilton dropped the ball that was in his hands. And then the next pass was, wow, how did you do that? Right on the money, 46 yards, touchdown, game winner.
Yeah, and, the Hamilton drop, obviously it's huge. It changes the game. The Browns had timeouts, so maybe they get the ball back, but obviously it's a huge play in the game. That was a good read by Winston. He just made a terrible throw. He just overthrew Elijah Moore by about 7 yards. And there were a couple of those during the game where that one wasn't taking a chance. That was a bad throw. But there was a deep post to Cedric Tillman in the first quarter, I think. And maybe it was the third quarter. They were going that way. And it could have been intercepted. He gave Tillman a chance, but the safety came over, goes through his hands. There were a couple other balls like that, but that is how he plays. Yeah. And, I think if he started 17 games for you, I don't know if that's sustainable, kind of like Joe Flacco, though. Joe Flacco threw interceptions. Oh, yeah. That's how they play. So after having not seen any explosive plays and no 20-point games and no 300-yard games, I think fans will take this type of performance.
Oh yeah, I'm sign me up for how many ever more there. Along those lines, though, this is interesting. Jake Trotter tweets this out. Throws of over 15 yards that were completed downfield. Deshaun Watson all season 9. Jameis Winston Sunday 8, including the game winner. That is stunning. I keep reading that and still don't believe it.
Yeah. I mean, you knew there was a difference, right? I mean, we watched all these games, but I didn't know it was that kind of difference. Although I kept looking up the numbers every week to see how few the Browns I still don't think they have a 40-yard play this season, because I think the 38-yard touchdown was the longest play this season. But even the number of 20-yard plays compared to how many they've given up, compared to a team like the Bengals that throws the ball deep, it was really startling. But, I mean, those numbers just kind of cement that for you.
All right, here's one more. Wild stats from Week 8. This from CBS Sports. Going into Week 8, the Browns had not scored 20 points in a game this season. We knew that. They also hadn't had a 200-yard passer. We knew that. Jameis Winston ended both of those streaks. 334 in the game, 29 points. Winston had more passing yards in the second half, 224, than Watson has had in any game this season. Again, it just kind of... we can come up with all these numbers. What it just tells you your eyes weren't lying. There was a significant difference at quarterback and with the offense.
Watson hasn't thrown. He's played 19 games for the Browns. Hasn't thrown for 300 yards. I think he'd only thrown for 200 4 or 6 times. I had it in one of my stories last night. And I think Kevin Stefanski's right when you talk about it's a whole bunch of different things. Like, I don't think you can just say it was a quarterback, right? They made a play caller change, whatever impact that had. The line was better, the protection was better. Wyatt Teller was back. Juwan Jones at left tackle. Ethan Posey gets centers, getting healthier. So all those things are a factor. Cedric Tillman caught the ball. Elijah Moore caught the ball. Having said all that, the biggest change was a quarterback. And the quarterback makes the protection look better. The quarterback makes the receivers look better. He gives them a chance. So you just can't get away from that.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, brownzone.com, and I'm going to step aside, take another time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is Buddy Brown, stuck in Baltimore. Speaking of stuck in Baltimore, how about sticking it to Baltimore? Had a feeling they were going to show some fight, and I just want to say I'm so proud of this team for not quitting. They played for the love of the game. They played for the city and those fans, and they played for themselves. And I'm really proud of this team for having that kind of effort. So way to go, Brownies. Unbelievable quarterback performance, and I just wish we could have all seen this a month ago. Who knows? All right.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, the one thing I would say, and I caught some heat, and again, I understand it. I said I wouldn't fire Kevin Stefanski, and it was pretty clear as I'm watching the beginning of that game. Didn't take long. You could see the team hasn't quit on him, and that's a big thing when you have struggled the way this team has struggled, and it's one of the reasons I think he should be back.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would never have considered firing him. And, this season's a long way away. If they, finish 2-15, who knows? I don't think the guy forgot how to coach. I think he's a good coach. I think he's got the right temperament, even though that bothers some fans. He's not crazy fiery. Although we saw some F-bombs out of him yesterday. We saw him barking at officials. I just think he's a smart coach that the guys play for. He knows how to run a team. That hasn't changed because your offense doesn't score points. It doesn't change because your quarterback's playing poorly. Now I get it. The buck stops with him. The team hasn't been good enough. But sometimes coaches have bad years or teams have bad years under good coaches. It just happens. So, I was nowhere close to that. And now we'll have to see. I mean, it's only one game that they won. But they certainly played hard. And you can see what that offense can do with competent quarterback play. And, I don't blame Stefanski for Deshaun Watson's poor play.
When you and again, I don't either. And I was one of the guys that thought you should try to build the offense around him. I mean, it makes sense. It just at some point you got to look at it and say this isn't working, and move on. And you almost sacrificed this season by sticking with him a couple extra games. Do you? I can't imagine you bring back everybody from and I'm talking about offensive staff. What do you think happens based on a team that you thought was going to certainly contend in the AFC, and they're not contending in the AFC? I mean, it's a great win, but I would imagine there are some changes that occur.
Yeah, I mean, let's assume they go 6-11, right? Which seems reasonable, whatever. Something like that. They miss the playoffs. It's not really close. They don't go on any kind of crazy run to get in contention. I would think there's certainly changes. And I would think it should happen, would happen on the offensive side of the ball for the second straight year, just to try something new, just to, maybe this staff didn't mesh like previous staffs. Again, it's hard. It's hard to judge. There's been other variables. I keep going back to the quarterback. We're going to take it out on Tommy Reese and Ken Dorsey because Deshaun Watson played poorly. I don't know if that's fair. Stefanski would have a better gauge of that. But I would think that they don't just keep status quo from a coaching staff or even organizationally if you have such a disappointing outcome to the season.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense. And the other thing is when you look at some of the drafts, and again, I'm not advocating in any way that they move on from Andrew Berry, but Jedrick Wills, I mean, that's not working out, and I know you and I both defended him more than most. DeJuan Jones, I know they moved him to left tackle. I know he's a big guy, but man, he's regressed. Martin Emerson, I think the league has figured out you can get by Martin Emerson. There are some concerning things with guys that now JOK, I'll give him, he's been fantastic, but there are some concerning things with guys that we thought were pretty good third, fourth round picks.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. The only caveat is when you're losing, everything looks bad. And when you win, you overlook guys who miss plays or guys who don't, I mean, Martin Emerson played great yesterday, but I think he played pretty good. But if they had lost, you'd go back and you'd point out Zay Flowers beating him here or whatever, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But when you go player by player on this roster, there's certainly a fair share of what I would call misses. And that falls on Andrew Berry and the personnel staff. And what you really have to consider if you're the Haslams is let's assume they're going to have a top whatever pick, top 5, top 10 pick, whatever that is. And you're trying to find the next guy at quarterback. Then it becomes, do you trust this group of talent evaluators to find that guy and to find the pieces around him, right? They haven't, maybe Cedric Tillman's, maybe he's a hit at receiver. Until the last few games, you would have said the Browns haven't drafted a receiver very good, right? Donovan Peoples-Jones would have been the best receiver they got, and he didn't even make it to his second contract. So, I think there are a lot of questions, and some of those will be answered over the remaining part of the season. Some won't. But, let's assume they miss the playoffs, then that's a huge letdown for this organization. And it will have the Haslams, I would assume, asking some difficult questions.
Yeah, you know what? As they should. There are a lot of expectations, and they didn't reach them. This is really interesting as well. Derrick Henry came in at he's on pace to go well over 2,000 yards rushing. So, second play of the second quarter, Browns defense allowed a 39-yard run to Henry. On the other 10 carries he had, they held him to a 3.4 yard per carry. He had been averaging 135 yards per game coming into the game, and Browns held Henry to 73 yards. Again, it's a heck of a job by that defense because that guy was on a tear.
Yeah, he was on pace to break the Eric Dickerson single-season rushing record. You know what impresses me about that, Dave, is the caller talked about effort. And I wrote a story at the end of last week that playing a guy like Derrick Henry really tests the commitment of the players. Because, I mean, we saw it, and I'm not trying to be glib here. You saw it with JOK, right? That's the damage that Derrick Henry can do. And you know that as a defender, you know it as a safety or a cornerback. And guys make business decisions when Derrick Henry is out in space. And the Browns didn't do that. They met him head on. It started on that first that goal or the fourth down stop that they had to start the game. What a huge play in the game. He gets the handoff, or he gets the wildcat snap, runs straight into the middle. JOK and Mo Hurst stop him. So I thought the Browns really showed up in a game where when you're 1-6 and have lost 5 in a row, you don't have to. And I got the sense that they would during the week, and they just proved that to me over the weekend. And it speaks to the coaching, it speaks to how well they played, but I think it also speaks to their mentality.
Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, BrownsZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey guys, Dan in Maryland here. Today's a great win against the Ravens aside. The thing that's got me most fed up about this team over the past several years is this seeming inability to build on success and string together 2 good seasons. In 2020, it seems like they're right to ship. We go to the playoffs. We beat the Steelers. Again, we enter 2021 with a lot of optimism, what we're going to build upon for the future, and 2021 is kind of a dud. 2023, all the injuries at quarterback and all these other positions, all the other problems the team had, we still managed to scrape out 11 wins and a playoff berth, and we enter 2024 with a great deal of hope and optimism, and again, things have already kind of gone off the rails, today's win aside. This transcends different quarterbacks, different coaches, different GMs. What is the problem with this organization and an inability to just build on success, to take a good year and be better than next year? Anyhow, keep up the good work. Go Browns. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, that's a great question. And I would say it's much harder to go from, not good to mediocre than from mediocre to consistently a playoff contender. And that's what I think, when you give the second contracts to Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, you're saying, make us consistent winners. So that's, they got to do that. That's their next task.
Yeah, for sure. That's what they're charged with, and that's what the Haslam's are counting on. It's a great point by the caller, and I think we're all aware of that. And he mentioned the examples. I go back to 2019. They played well in 2018, right? They hadn't won forever. They get to 7 wins. The next year, they're a disaster under Freddie Kitchens. Well, I can point to Freddie there. Between 20 and 21, was it a fall off in Baker? I mean, you can always point to something, but it's been a habit. It's been a pattern. And I would point at the locker room. I think There just isn't the tradition of winning that you see in Baltimore, you see in Pittsburgh. And I think that's what comes back and catches the Browns. And, you know, they say a lot of the right things. And I think Myles Garrett's trying to lead. I really do. But I just don't know if there's enough guys that have won consistently. I don't know what it is. And I think it's tough to put your finger on. But they have not been able to show and to prove that they can follow up a good win with another, or a good season with another one. And until they do, that's going to be a huge question and huge disappointment.
All right, top graded offensive players against the Ravens from PFF. Top graded player offensively was quarterback Jameis Winston, 78.5. Elijah Moore, 77. Cedric Tillman, 75.9. Conklin rated up there, then Judy, Njoku, Foreman, Bitonio, Chubb, and Posick. So Winston grades out the highest. The one that really looks pretty good, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, Cedric Tillman has played a couple of good games in a row.
Yeah, he has. The Winston grade's a little higher than I thought just because of the missed interceptions that Baltimore had.
Yep.
But obviously, he played really well. Yeah, Tillman, it's not like he wasn't playing before the Amari Cooper trade. He was, and I'd have to go back and look at the snaps he got each week. But, you know, he was out there either close to the same amount as Elijah Moore or maybe even more for a week or two, but just wasn't getting the opportunities. He had 3 catches for 9 yards, I think, at one point this season through a bunch of games. And then Amari Cooper gets traded, and he just needs to take on a bigger role, and he steps right into it. You know, we saw glimpses of this last year, the ability to catch a ball in traffic, the ability to fight through a tackle like he did on the slant, his first touchdown. He breaks the tackle at the 5. He's a big dude with strong hands, and he can run after the catch. I think there's a lot to like there. Now we need to see it more consistently, obviously, week in and week out. But the Browns were really high on him coming into the season, and he's starting to reward them for the faith that they had.
Yeah, and again, you know, you mentioned a big body, and he seems to have the ability to get behind defense. I know he's not one of those guys that runs 4-3, but he seems to get behind defenses, and that's the bottom line with a receiver.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I flash back to, I think the Browns practiced in the field house once in training camp because of weather. And it was actually the day that the storms were terrible and there were tornadoes and everything. And we were inside the field house in Berea, and it's an easy memory for me. He got behind the defense 2 or 3 times that day. And it's like, okay, you know, he really showed up in that practice, and I talked to him about it a few days later. And he's a confident guy that really believes he has this in him. And I know it was frustrating for him not to show up on Sundays and maybe not get the chances that he thought he deserved. But he's taking advantage of them now that he has those opportunities.
Well, here's another one. This is along the lines of the caller saying, how can you win consistently? I think one of the first steps, and Dan Murphy tweets this out, under Kevin Stefanski, since he's been hired as a head coach 2020, the Browns are 10-4 at home against AFC North opponents. That's a 71.4% winning percentage. So if you're going to win consistently, you better consistently beat the teams in your division at home. Then you got to go out and split with them on the road, and that's something they haven't been able to do just yet.
Yeah, I think that is a significant stat. And, you know, I know it's been pick on Kevin Stefanski this season, and I get it. But that record there has no coach before him has had anything similar to that record. I haven't double-checked, but I feel pretty confident saying that. And that's a huge step in the right direction, that you're able to establish some kind of consistency at home and do it against one of the top divisions in football. And the Browns no longer feel overmatched when they match up against Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, or Baltimore. They went and got a huge win in Baltimore last year. They won a playoff game in Pittsburgh under Stefanski. And though I know they haven't won the division yet, and that's going to be a huge step if and when they ever get there. But I think they've taken steps toward that under Stefanski. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, and again, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this year plays out. But unlike previous weeks, there's some stuff to build on with Jameis Winston as quarterback.
Oh, no doubt. I think this offense has to feel much better about itself. You got Nick Chubb back, and he looked better in week 2 than he did in week 1, and I would assume he's only going to get better. And it's really unbelievable that he's at this level already, given everything he went through. I didn't know if he'd get to this level. The offensive line looks like it's getting healthier with Wyatt Teller back and Posick back in there. They got to figure out what they're doing at left tackle. Maybe they leave DeJuan Jones in there. They could have the same 5 guys for the first time since week 1 and week 2. So there's certainly stuff to build on. And your quarterback can threaten the field, threaten all areas of the field, which makes defenses respect that, and they have to play you more honestly.
Scott Petrek, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrek, make sure you check him out. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also check him out online, brownzone.com. We're going to turn our attention to the Cavaliers, a 3-0 start. They're in Madison Square Garden tonight to face the Knicks. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com straight ahead. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones. Diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers here on Sports4CLE. Cavs are 3-0 on the season, getting ready to face the Knicks in New York tonight. This is from ESPN.com. Best worst of week 1 in the NBA. Which contender superstar stood out the most? Dave McMenamin, national writer. The Cavaliers have won their first 3 games by a combined 61 points. Yes, the Raptors, Pistons, Wizards don't figure to be postseason contenders, but Cleveland's offense, which is shooting 54.5% from the field, suggests the team has already grasped new coach Kenny Atkinson's offense. With that, let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com, also co-host of the Full Court Cleveland, which you can see on the FanDuel Sports Network. And Sam, the offense looks like what Kenny Atkinson said it was going to look like.
Yeah, this has been what was promised all of training camp and the preseason, and we saw it come to fruition during the first 3 games against what I boldly will predict are non-playoff teams, which is hard to do in the day and age of the play-in tournament to not even get a shot at the playoffs. But, regardless, the idea is to keep the ball moving, get Evan Mobley more involved, and get production from your bench. And regardless of the opponent, so far we have seen that from the Cavs, and I think that's very promising moving forward.
Yeah, and again, the first 3 games, that's fine. Challenges will present themselves. What have you seen from Evan Mobley? That's a guy that, we talked about how important he was. What have you seen from him in those first 3 games?
Yeah, they want to get him the ball more often and get him more involved and more efficient. And I think that that's been the case these first 3 games. And what I like about Mobley is he hasn't forced anything. Everything's come within the flow of the offense. That first game against Toronto was dominant and has been very good in the other 2 games. Really haven't had a need for him to take more than 12, 13 shots a night because everybody's getting it's a very share the wealth type of system right now. Everybody's getting an opportunity. We saw Jared Allen the other night take 10 shots and not miss any. So I think that with the way things are going, they're using Mobley as they should, which is make sure he's involved, but don't make sure he's involved at the expense of everything else. So it's been so far so good with Evan Mobley and hasn't lost a step defensively. One of the elite rim protectors in the NBA, which he's been his entire short career. So I think for the most part, Mobley's better than ever.
So, I know from your Cavs dribbles on Hoopswire.com, Sam's Cavs Dribbles. Atkinson seems really comfortable going 10, 11 deep, not feeling the need to wear out the starters. He kind of understands, the 82 games kind of wear on a guy when you're playing him a ton of minutes early, especially.
Yeah, we've seen that with Donovan Mitchell. I'll be watching the Cavs, and then all of a sudden I'm like, boy, at the end of the first quarter, in the middle of the second quarter, I'm like, Mitchell's been out a long time. But, that's what you got to do. Kenny Atkinson has been around the NBA a long time as a coach. He understands the, you got to play the long game here. We got 82 games to go. We expect to make the playoffs. We want to keep our guys as healthy as possible and not worn down. We saw at the end of last year, and there's nothing you could do about it. It's not the previous coaching staff's fault, but we saw Jared Allen get injured. We saw Donovan Mitchell's legs, his knee was bothering him toward the end of the year, and that's just from having a lot of mileage. Part of that is anyway. A big part of it's just dumb luck, but we're seeing here, as I wrote, that Kenny Atkinson not afraid to go 10, 11 deep and use as many people as possible for as long as possible while still winning games. And I think that that's only going to benefit them, with their goal being to play their best basketball of the year after the All-Star break in February.
The other thing that you kind of tweeted out, and it has been noticeable, they're kind of making the adjustments you want to see in the second half. All the things that we were kind of saying, boy, if the Cavs could do this in the first three games, they're doing. But they're making adjustments to what teams are doing against them in the first half and correcting it and making teams pay in the second half.
Now, that's something you want to see in all sports, but particularly the NBA. If you maybe don't have the energy, or your offense isn't working and clicking as well as it should be, that you're playing, making those adjustments at halftime and coming out in the third quarter and really kind of, putting things to bed. We've seen that in all three games. The first three games were all kind of close for the most part in the first half, and then the Cavs would go up 18, 20, in the case of the Raptors, 30 in the second half. So, Dave, how long have we seen Cavs basketball where they're not playing well? They're playing okay in the first half, then they come out in the third quarter and they're just lost. So this has been a nice change as far as Cavs fans, getting to see, our team's playing best. It's best when it means the most in the second half, and really putting these games out of reach so far in the first three games, really midway through the third quarter.
Yeah, it also seems like there's a purpose. So they understand where they want to get their shots from, I think is and again, I know it's three games and the league's going to adjust, but at least there seems to be a better understanding of, if I get the ball here, I can do this and this for a number of the guys.
There's just a much better rhythm and flow to the offense. They're playing with a much smarter pace. Kenny Atkinson has kind of said, there's three kind of paces, and he compared it to driving. He said, first, you have the Autobahn where you're going super fast and trying to get points very quickly. And you also have, kind of the middle of the road pace where you're driving at an even speed and just, taking what the traffic will give you, what the rest of the traffic will give you, depends on how fast you can go. And then there's the, hey, we're in downtown New York City where, you're trying to look for a parking spot. It's bumper to bumper, and you're trying to find an opening somewhere so you can keep going. And he said, and we've got to master all three of those. And I think that we're seeing the Cavs, as we've seen, that, again, early small sample size, they're able to efficiently play at any of those paces and seem to be faring well. And as you said, Dave, nobody's forcing anything up. We don't see anybody like, it's my turn to shoot. It's always, let's get to the open guy, because in this offense, if it goes well, if it goes like it's supposed to, we're all going to get looks at the basket. We don't have to worry about getting our own shots from a individual standpoint if you play within the concept of the team.
Last time you were on, we talked a little bit about this guy, Ty Jerome, and it's been really nice to have a guy come in and run the point like this. So here are numbers against Toronto: 14 points, 6 of 7 from the field, 6 assists, 2 steals. Against Pistons, 13, 4 of 6 from the field, 4 assists and a steal. Against the Wizards, 14 points, 4 of 6 from the field, 3 assists and a steal. He's averaging almost 14 points a game, shooting 73% from the field, and 4 assists and a steal, almost a steal and a half per game. If he shoots 74% from the field, I think we're gonna be able to keep him for a while.
Yeah. If he could even do half that well, you're in business. But Dean Wade says Ty Jerome has the meanest slow step in the game, and it's really accurate. You think about how he's getting these points. This isn't a guy who's just standing out there launching 3-pointers. I mean, he's getting to the lane and throwing in these little flip shots that I think the defenders are like, did he really just take that? And the next thing you know, it goes in. So very efficient, really the kind of, what we've talked about so far, really kind of the poster child for that when it comes to being able to know when to shoot, know when to get in the lane and kick it out or feed one of the big guys underneath. And really he's just very crafty, and he's good size, for a point guard, 6'5", can see over a lot of, opposing defenders. He's just a real smart, crafty player with outstanding footwork in terms of being able to get to the basket. And keep this up. And we always say how the Cavs didn't make any off-season additions. Well, Ty Jerome, of course, missed all of last year except for a game and a half. And this really almost looks like their big off-season addition so far. So, and not only is he scoring and shooting very well, but he's done a good job defensively and has really just kept the offense moving.
I think that's it. The offense flows with him in there, and that's what you want from a backup point guard, without question. Sam Amico from Sports4CLE.com and I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We will continue talking Cavs. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Cavs with Sam Amico from Sports4CLE.com and Full Court Cleveland on the FanDuel Sports Network. Take a look at this. 3 takeaways from the Cavs' first week. This from NBA.com. 125.5 points per 100 possessions that the Cavs offense scored is better than any 3-game stretch they had after the All-Star break last year. They continue to, number 2, they continue to heavily stagger the minutes of the first 4 players, with the first 4 having played just 38 total minutes together over 3 games. Number 3, their opponents have shot just 56 of 120 in the paint in the first 2 games. The Cavs outscored the Raptors and Pistons by a total of 40 in the restricted area. And Sam, kind of all those point to up-tempo, still playing defense, all the things that we said they need to do to be successful.
Yeah, and I saw obviously Karis LeVert's name mentioned in there. He's another big reason. You talk about Ty Jerome, Karis LeVert, and the threat of Sam Merrill's 3-point shooting off the bench. All of those guys look improved. And I know Ty Jerome didn't play last season, but I'm saying at any other point in his career, when he's with the Warriors and Thunder and Suns, he just looks like he's so comfortable here. Karis LeVert has been wildly efficient, really doing the same things that Jerome is, even though they have a different style, getting in the lane, getting points, We saw the one game he was 8-8 from the field, missed his ninth shot that rolled around and came out. Levert did, but he's doing more than just scoring. He's able to get to the basket and distribute. So that's the nice thing is they're getting that. They're not really losing a step when they go to their bench, which was kind of one of the big fears going into the season. And of course, as we saw there, Dave, as you mentioned, defensively, they've been every bit as good, if not better than last year. So you throw in the fact that they've been a lot more efficient offensively and every bit as good, if not better, defensively when they were already in the top 5 or 6 defensive teams of the league last year. I think that goes a long way in explaining not only 3-0, but 3-0 with 3 pretty much blowouts.
All right, this from NBA.com as well. NBA Power Rankings entering week 2. So entering this week, Celtics 1, Thunder 2, Lakers 3. Cavs are 4 ahead of the Knicks. Cavs offensive rating 125.5. Second, defensive rating 105.2. Fourth, net rating plus 20.3, which is second. And again, all those are against teams that are not likely to be playoff teams, but you got to beat the teams that are on your schedule.
Right, that's exactly it. We got a 3-4 matchup apparently, according to the NBA rankings, coming up with LeBron James and the Lakers making their lone visit of the season to Cleveland already before we even get to Halloween. So, one of the things we saw there too was pace was 12. Which is fine. I mean, you don't have to be 1 or 2 or 3. I don't think that's the Cavs' goal, but I think Kenny Atkinson would like to see them in the top 10, 8 to 10 range in terms of pace compared to the rest of the league. And you've got 79 games left to get there. So there are some things they're still figuring out. But, with like you said, Dave, you can only beat the teams that you play and play well against the teams that you play. I would be a little concerned if these games had been a lot closer, but the Cavs really, even though they were close for a quarter or a half, the Cavs really just put their foot down. And that's something that I thought that they've struggled to do, in the 2 years of the Donovan Mitchell era is kind of put these teams away and step on their throat, so to speak. And it's just been so much better at that in terms of they're systematically breaking teams down. They step up their offense, they step it up defensively, and it seems like it's always happening in the second half. So, if you play that way and play the right way now and build these habits now, win, lose, or draw, it's only going to benefit you come playoff time. So these are right now, it doesn't really matter who the opponent is. They just want to play their way and get that nailed down and be consistent at it so that they're at their best again, once April and May, and if you're lucky enough to get there, June rolls around. You want to be sharpest then. Right now, it's almost still like the preseason where you're trying to work out some kinks and, you go back and look at film and say, these are the things that we did wrong. Here's what we did right. And, we got 79 more games or so to get it implemented to near perfection or as close to perfection as we can.
So the Cavs are on the road against the Knicks, Madison Square Garden. What are you paying attention to? This is obviously a step up in competition as well, as the Knicks are 5th in that ranking, Cavs are 4th. What are you paying attention to tonight?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is kind of the matchups defensively for the Cavs, and see, with the Knicks having Karl Anthony Towns now, I'm assuming that Jared Allen is going to be starting off on him, but the Knicks, quote unquote, big guys are very perimeter oriented, whereas Mobley and Allen are, they are defensively down near the basket trying to protect the basket. They're going to have to come out away from the hoop against the Knicks because of Karl Anthony Towns shoots a lot of threes, even though he's their starting center right now. You've got Mikal Bridges. Maybe Dean Wade starts on him, and Mobley starts on OG Anunoby. It's just a very interesting matchup, and something that the Cavs haven't faced yet is really a very, very talented front court, and a front court that plays a different style. So to me, it's really kind of come down to a matchup of front court. Darius Garland's obviously going to have to play extremely well against Jalen Brunson, who's really just, become one of the top 5 or 6 point guards in the NBA. And at nights is, certain nights is number 1. And, Josh Hart has always done a nice job defending Donovan Mitchell. So there's a lot at play here. But again, to me, if you're going to win on the road in the NBA against a good team, you have to play a near perfect game. And that's where the Cavs are tonight. And again, win or lose against the Knicks, it's not, make or break the season. It's okay, here's our first major test. And the Cavs have 3 of them this week. Fortunately for them, 2 of them are at home against the Lakers Wednesday, the Magic on Friday. Then they got to go to the Milwaukee Bucks on Saturday. So this is a much tougher stretch than what they faced. And I think what you're really looking for, Dave, is for the Cavs to keep their principles intact and not get, out of sorts and start playing hero ball if they should get down against one of these good teams.
Sam Amico, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, thanks for having me. We will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, make sure you check him out, hoopswire.com. Also, Full Court Cleveland, which you can see on FanDuel Sports Network. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.